For me personally, I'd rather have a million points because I feel very confident in my ability to get more than 1 cent of value out of every point. Status is one of those areas that I think is largely misunderstood. No shade to people who purchase points. I think there are scenarios where it could make sense. A lot of times, for example, Hilton has amazing sales on their points. And if you do the math, it can be cheaper to purchase with buying the points and then purchasing with those points versus just paying the cash rate.
Hey there, points people. You just heard a clip from Jess Borquez from Points by Jay. Jess has helped millions of people to spend less time worrying about their money and more time enjoying it. She created Points by Jay to consolidate her most game changing financial and travel revelations. With her knack for simplifying complex topics, Jess helps credit card points beginners to understand what a rewarding experience points earning and redemptions can be. In this episode, we play a game of Would You Rather, Points Edition. You'll find out if Jess would rather have a windfall of points or cash. Would she rather never have to take a positioning flight again or have all of her household expenses suddenly be 50% cheaper? Would she rather go for the card with the bigger sign up bonus or the one that earns more points long term? We go over how to think through these types of decisions and so much more. And if you are in the market for a new card, to earn points so that you can travel like Jess, check out geobreezetravel.com/cards. And if you're not sure what card is right for you, I offer free credit card consultations at geobreezetravel.com/consultations. And if you're looking for even more strategies for how to maximize your points, sign up for our free live training by going to geobreezetravel.com/webinar. I only do these types of free trainings every few months, and we don't record them. We go through tips and tricks that I don't post anywhere else, so if you miss this free training, you miss out. Again, you can register at geobreezetravel.com/webinar. Hope to see you there. And now, on with the show. Welcome to the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast, a show for anyone wanting to level up their travel hacking lifestyle. I'm your host, Julia Menez. I'm a travel hacker, coach, speaker, Filipino-American ENTJ who loves solid travel gear and using shortcuts on spreadsheets. On this show, I'm on a mission to bring you travel hackers from all walks of life to help you level up your travel hacking game. We dive into credit cards, miles, points, strategy, mindset, and the secrets behind how to travel the world for next to no cost. So let's get hacking. Hey, Jess. Welcome to the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast.
Hey, Julia, thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here too, and really excited to talk through how to make different decisions that I think a lot of people who are beginners in the points and miles world face on a daily basis. But before we get into all of that, tell us about you and how did you get into the world of points and miles?
I spent about 12 years in the marketing and advertising universe as my career. And that entire time, as part of what I did as a hobby, was learn about personal finance. I'm obsessed and I wanted to really figure out this universe. But only a few years ago, I started to realize that I had kind of dismissed credit cards as an important part of what a good financial strategy looks like. And I really started to understand the power that points and miles have to help reduce my travel budget overall. And that's really what got me hooked on the space. And I've been making content now for about a year and a half, mostly on Instagram and on TikTok.
And your channel has really taken off because you focus a lot more on beginner tips and things that people tend to maybe not understand right off the bat. Is that correct?
Yes, and that is very intentional. I want to speak to the person who is where I was at that moment, where I didn't quite understand why I should be paying attention to my credit card points, because I think there are a lot of people that are hoarding them, stockpiling them, and just don't even realize that they could be taking amazing trips with them. So that's my focus.
Amazing. All right, let's jump into some of the questions about would you rather, because I think as people go through the world of points and miles and try to figure out earning points and redeeming points and status and all of that, it's an infinity number of decisions that people can make. And there's a lot of decision fatigue involved. So maybe, hopefully, this episode will help people with how to navigate some of those different choices. So let's start with would you rather have 1 million points or $12,000?
Ooh, for me personally, I'd rather have a million points because I feel very confident in my ability to get more than 1 cent of value out of every point, usually more than 2 cents of value out of every point. So I would pick the points. But if I were someone trying to decide between going the cash back versus the points route, I would start by asking myself, what's my number one goal? If I'm in a place financially right now where I could really use some extra dollars in my pocket, go the cash back route. There is no shame in that. However, if you're a big traveler and you're trying to fund 2 to 3 luxury trips every year, points could be a massive value add to making sure that you're spending a lot less money on those trips than if you had just paid the cash price.
Amazing. Would you rather have 100 million points or $1 million?
Ooh, this is where it gets tricky. I think the points are so intimidating in that scenario of how much are they going to devalue over time? Could I spend them quickly enough where it would make sense, or would it make more sense to invest over time? In that scenario, I wonder who this magician is that's giving me this choice, but I might explore could I split the difference and maybe go half and half with the points and cash route?
Yeah, I think there's definitely that weird parabolic effect, like you mentioned, where if you are really strapped for cash and you're like, I need $12,000 to cover groceries, at that stage in your personal finance journey, yeah, cashback makes a lot more sense. And then as you're like, oh, I have expendable income, maybe we take some luxury trips, like you mentioned, points make a lot more sense. But at some point, we work with a lot of business owners who are spending 5 million or $10 million in expenses per year, and they're just generating points like it's nothing. And then I'm like, do you need to be earning 20 million points a year? Because they're like, well, I've got a business to run. I can only take so many first class flights per year. And even if they were completely retired, like, how much do you reasonably like? Do you want to be on a plane every single day in first class? Does all of that exist? Can you really maximize 100 million points? And if you're like, well, I got $5 million of travel out of it per year, I think that would be too much for me. So I
I
probably
completely agree. And maybe I'll hope to be in that position someday where we face that conundrum. But I think one other thing to consider if you are in a position where you're points rich and you don't have the capacity to travel right now, or you just have more than you can possibly use, consider that the ultimate gift. If I could give everyone in my life an amazing travel experience, like no better present. So don't forget that you can also book travel for others using your points.
for sure. Would you rather take, if you only had enough points to cover one trip in business class or three trips in economy internationally?
I flip flop between business class and economy regularly throughout the year because I love, love, love enjoying business class. I think it's an amazing experience. And depending on how quickly I need to bounce back from a trip, I think it can be an essential if I need to get sleep on the flight for business purposes. But I'm regularly still found in economy because I love to travel so much that I can't earn enough to always be on a business class trip. So if I'm deciding between 3 trips in economy versus 1 in business class, I'm gonna choose 3 in economy because there's so much of the world I still want to see, and that just opens it up a little bit more.
Makes sense. I think I'd actually go the other way where I really don't want to play economy anymore. There hasn't been a situation where I'm like, I need to be in this other country on this date and like we could just can't make a points deal work out. If there were just no points deals going on, I'm just like, we'll staycation here, we'll do something domestic in the United States, use our points for a nice hotel. I don't feel the need to be crossing an ocean. But that being said, I've also been to a lot of countries already where like the bucket list is pretty well covered and a lot of places I want to go back to and experience again. But I'm just like, oh, I'd rather have one like nice business class trip per year rather than three economy trips, and everybody's a little bit different there.
Yeah, and I think my priorities have changed and will continue to change over time as my time constraints change and my financial situation continues to evolve. I think that equation is always in flux.
If you had to pick one lane for the rest of forever, would you rather use your points for only flights, or only hotels?
I would have to pick hotels in that situation because like I was just mentioning, I think I can slum it in economy to get to somewhere amazing and have an incredible experience. For me personally, I've had more memorable experiences at phenomenal hotels versus I've had some very memorable flights, but the differences between very memorable flights tend to that delta tends to be quite small versus an amazing hotel is really quite different from a sensible economy level hotel. So I would probably choose the hotel redemptions, and if I had to choose one chain, I am a high early at heart. I've gotten just incredible experiences at Hyatt's over the years, and so that would be where I would lock in.
I think a lot of people also are like, well, it's 8 hours on a plane, but it's like 4 days in the hotel. And so if you're in a bad hotel, like a bug scurries across the floor or something like that, I'm just like, I'm done. No, no more of this. But if it's like you're next to a person that you really don't want to be next to on a plane, you're like, 7 hours, whatever.
Completely agree, and when I was in my mid-20s, my roommate brought home bed bugs, and it was one of the most traumatic experiences trying to get rid of these bed bugs. It impacted our lives for months, and we pinpointed the source of the bed bugs to a not so desirable lodging that she had chosen the month prior, and so I think that has also colored my decisions of I need to stay somewhere where I can feel confident that it's clean and I can be really comfortable. I still always check for bed bugs though.
Oh, God, that's rough. That is a rough story. I have thankfully never had a bed bug situation. Would you
I
rather, I guess I'll say, do you ever do the strategy of purchasing points when they're on sale?
personally have not. That being said, I don't no shade to people who purchase points. I think there are scenarios where it could make sense. A lot of times, for example, Hilton has amazing sales on their points, and if you do the math, it can be cheaper to purchase with buying the points and then purchasing with those points versus just paying the cash rate. So one of my mantras that I'm always sharing is do the math. Whether you're trying to figure out if an annual fee makes sense or if it makes sense to buy the points, just do the math. And with the purchasing of the points, I also recommend don't buy them just to have a stockpile. Buy them when it makes sense, when you need to redeem them right away, when there's a use case immediately rather than just as a preventative measure.
For sure. I always tell people also, did you run the math on this or did you just have shiny object syndrome because something popped up on Instagram? Always run the math. Would you rather have a card that has a larger sign up bonus or earns more points per dollar in the long run?
So my strategy with credit cards, and this is not everyone's strategy, I think there's a lot of very fair ways to go about this, but sign-up bonuses are really the way to supercharge your points earning. And it's very hard to earn enough in everyday spend to make that a comparable choice versus a new sign-up bonus. Because a lot of times you're earning like 17 points per dollar spent when you're earning toward a sign-up bonus. So that being said, I'm really conservative with how many cards I apply for in a year. I wait 90 days between applications, and that's just what I feel comfortable with my credit score being really important to me. So that's a personal choice. And some people apply for a lot more cards in a year, and that's just not my approach or my strategy. So I would rather have a strong sign up bonus for those few cards that I am applying for, but I also want to do the math and know that's going to be a card that I want to keep in my wallet for a long time to come, or that I've got a downgrade strategy on the horizon where I know that card still makes sense for me to have down the road.
I think this is another one of those parabolic effect things where if you're just like, I don't have a good credit score. I'm just getting started with this. You might just want something that has like more cash back or something. And then it reaches the point that you're describing. And then if you, once again, are a business owner where you're spending 1 million or $2 million a year on business expenses and putting them on credit cards, you're not concerned about sign up bonuses. You're not like, oh, I should open 40 cards this year because I can meet all the sign up bonuses. That is definitely not what people who are spending $2 million a year are concerned about. They're like, okay, but like, how do I just one and done this, have one or two cards that have tons of bonus points on them for the things I'm actually spending on? How do I just automate this so that my accountant doesn't kill me? Because if we mess up our bookkeeping, it's just going to be a mess. So I think this is another one of like, how much are you spending? If you're spending, I'd say like under $100,000 a year, yeah, maybe getting some more credit cards is probably the way to go. If you're spending more than $100,000 a year, I think it's very important to make sure you have the right cards and make sure that you're not just getting shiny object syndrome, because if you're spending that much per year, either you've got a business that you probably want to put more attention to than your credit card strategy, or you can't afford to do any of this. If your income can't justify more than $100,000 of expenses, then you just need to taper back on all of this anyway.
Totally agree. And I think at the opposite end of the spectrum, a question that I get sometimes is, I don't know for sure if I can meet the minimum spend on this credit card. Should I still apply for it? And my response is always no. I would wait until the moment where you're confident. You've got your strategy of how you're going to meet that minimum spend so that you can get that sign up bonus, because the sign up bonus is so valuable. If you're not certain, I would pump the brakes and wait for the moment where you're sure that you can meet that minimum spend and get all those points.
I advise people to have at least the minimum spend already ready to go in your checking account so that when that minimum spend hits your credit card statement, you're ready to pay it off. Don't run into having to do interest payments on these. I know we've mentioned that on the show before, but just don't. The rates are so high on these credit cards. And don't get a card that has $4,000 of minimum spend. And then you're like, oh, I only planned out $3,000 that I actually needed. So I guess I'm buying $1,000 worth of useless crap on Amazon. Don't do that either. Would you rather go for hotel status or skip it?
Status is one of those areas that I think is largely misunderstood. I think a lot of people think they have to go for status. It feels like something, if I'm interested in travel, I should have status. The reality is, I don't think it makes sense for most people to make decisions based on where can I earn status, because most people aren't traveling frequently enough where that would make sense. If you're traveling every week as a business consultant, absolutely chase status. But if you're traveling 2 to 3 times a year, which I think is the more typical scenario, don't worry so much about status and instead pay for upgrades that might come with status to make your stay more comfortable, if that's really what's attracting you to the idea of having status to begin with. Because one of, I think, the misunderstood areas of status is, well, if I have it, I'll get the upgrades. I'll definitely get some perks out of it, but that's not always guaranteed, especially with hotel status. You might have the top tier status, and there just simply isn't an upgraded room available at the time that you're there. For people who are traveling a lot, absolutely go for it. I would put myself in that category, but this is also my job to travel and to talk about it on the internet. So I know that for most people, that's not the case. And it doesn't make sense to make poor financial choices just for the sake of earning a higher tier status.
Yeah, I think that's something that needs to be repeated more often is that everybody you're watching on Instagram who's traveling all the time, number one, we're not actually traveling all the time. And number two, it is our job to be doing that. That's how we create marketing material and make content and do all of these things that you see online. And if you have a regular 9 to 5 job and you don't always have time to constantly be jumping on deals, don't worry about it. This is literally our jobs.
Exactly. Yes. And I think the same, I don't know if your next question is about airlines, but a very similar message on that front as well. If you're not traveling often, don't give the brain space to it, because it doesn't matter as much if you're not traveling frequently.
Would you rather have airline status or hotel status?
Based on what I've experienced, I'd rather have hotel status, because with Hyatt, the upgrade frequency I know is just so much more reliable than with, I have American Airlines status. I have very high status with American Airlines, and I don't get upgraded that often. And it's largely because I'm flying on really popular legs where people who travel every single week are on that flight too. So I'm not going to get the upgraded seat. I think in terms of bang for my buck, I've gotten a lot more value out of my hotel status versus my airline status.
Same for me, because I'm trying to think of all the benefits that we get from having status with an airline versus a hotel. And even if the hotel's completely full, you still get free breakfast on Hyatt, and I have Marriott Titanium as well. So that free breakfast is worth something, even if we don't get upgrades. And you get suite upgrade certificates that sometimes will get you guaranteed upgrades, which are nice as well. It takes a lot on American Airlines before you can get those system wide upgrade certificates, like a lot before you can get those. And I'm trying to think what else we get out of airline status. It has come in handy a couple times just because I have American Airlines Executive Platinum, which comes with One World Emerald, and that got me into the Cathay Pacific first class lounge while traveling abroad, even though we weren't flying first class. But how often does that really happen?
Yeah, it's a couple times a year, I think, and honestly, the best American Airlines status perk, I think, happens with the very first rung of status at Gold. You get access to the free option of choosing main cabin extra seats without having to pay more, and that's the perk from American Airlines that I get the most value out of on a regular basis, and I don't need a high level of status to get that perk. I think every person should look at those perks with a cautionary tale in the back of their mind of, will I really get upgraded all that often? Don't make poor financial decisions or buy really expensive plane tickets just to chase that status.
And if you do get upgraded and it's a flight from Dallas to Chicago, that's not a lay flat seat with American Airlines. That is a glorified recliner. So keeping that in
100%.
mind. One reason that it does make sense to chase status if you are flying a lot, or also, once again, business owners, if you are the kind of person who networks in business or first class and actually talks to the person who is seated next to you and you're getting contacts that way, it might make sense. That is far and few for me. I think I've done that like twice on American Airlines flights where they were just like, tell me about what you do. And I was like, okay, cool. So I have 2 business cards from CEOs of, like, random companies, and I know a lot of people listening to this podcast are like, "I do not want to talk to random strangers on my flight. It's absolutely not worth it." But I have heard that as a common strategy for people who do more business networking of, it's worth it to pay for the upgrade to first class because I get a lot of sales leads or something that way. If that's, you've probably run the ROI and it makes sense. For 90% of people or more, probably doesn't make sense to pay $1,000 just to be a little bit more comfortable on a 3-hour flight.
Julia, you're blowing my mind. I've never heard of someone doing that before for the networking opportunities. I think if you're spending $1,000 for that upgraded seat, maybe blow that on a conference ticket instead where you're narrowing in on your target audience of people that you might want to talk to because yeah, I'm in the club of I don't want to talk to people on planes for the most part. That's a really funny perk, I guess, that I haven't thought of with the upgrades.
I don't know if you've ever seen any of those silly TikToks that, I don't know if they're joking or not, but there was like a whole swath of girls who are like, it's worth it to invest to sit in first class because you could meet your future rich husband there. And I'm like, girl, that guy's probably on points.
I love that, and I have not seen that, but I think I can see those girls walking onto the plane because 'cause they're dressed nicely and they've done their makeup and hair, and I have never been that girl, but I admire those girls, and I think that takes a lot of effort.
Oh, yeah. I'm showing up in the same t shirts, like the same 10 t shirts that I wear my Instagram photos and on my YouTube videos and on the plane and everywhere else. Same 10 t-shirts and yeah, wearing dirty sneakers, jeans, leather jacket and being like, "Hey, I'm not demure," or whatever the word of the day is now.
Demure, mindful, cutesy. No, not on a plane, I'm definitely not.
Not on a plane. No, maybe if I am taking photos of myself for like business class content, but not for a dude. I've got a dude.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Would you rather have multiple premium cards like the Venture X or the Amex Platinum, or just stick to a maximum of one premium credit card that's like more than $400 per year?
I have a couple of them. That's because this is what I do for a living. For 95% of people, I would say that doesn't make any sense. If you've got one really high-end card that's getting you into airport lounges that you're most excited to be in, that's enough. A lot of people are paying too much in annual fees because they're getting duplicative benefits across multiple high-end cards. I can see applying for a couple of high-end cards, keeping one of those for a year because you got an amazing sign-up bonus, but then you need to reevaluate and think about, does it still make sense to hang on to a couple of these high-end options, or should I downgrade one of them so that I'm really hanging on to the one that best fits my needs for perks like travel insurance, airport lounge access, all of the ones that tend to be associated with those high-end fees. They tend to have very, very similar benefits.
For sure. Like, how many TSA pre-check credits do you need? If you have a large family, you can use them for other people, but yeah, like you mentioned, most of the time it's just the same duplicative benefits over and over again. So we mentioned a couple of times like this is our job to do this, and a lot of the credit card companies will limit how much we can send out our own referral links. But in a world where we could send out unlimited referrals, would you rather earn referral points for getting somebody to sign up for a referral credit card, or would you rather earn money like we usually do with affiliate commissions?
Me personally, I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where there's only so many points that I can realistically use in a year. And because this is my job, I can't pay my bills with points. And so I would rather earn money for the majority of them, but it is awesome to get referral points. The way it works now, just in full transparency, is most of the links that people are clicking on when they're going through my link in bio, I'm earning a cash commission on those applications for credit cards. And so that's my income, and that's how my business sustains itself. And so I wouldn't want to replace all of that with exclusively points.
Yeah, for me, I think it often depends on the card. With Built, there is such a high threshold of like how many referrals you can get, and the Built points are worth a lot to me. And I don't remember how much they paid in commissions, but the points were a better deal. So I just have like my Built referral link out there instead of my affiliate code that they gave me. So I take the Built points instead of the Built money. For a lot of the Chase cards, you probably are aware that compliance is annoying with Chase, and you had to jump through so many hoops to get them. So I'm just like, we're not going to do those affiliate links for me anymore. I actually put referral links from students in our Points Accelerator course up on my page to hopefully get other people referral points instead, because I'm going to max out at 5 anyway, and it takes a couple months for those to post anyway. So I just send out referral links from students in the Points Accelerator, hopefully help them get those instead. But yeah, people can't pay rent on points. They can't buy groceries on points. So those affiliate commissions are how a lot of people in the points space make their money.
100%. That's so awesome that you do that for your students. I think that's great.
Thanks. Let's talk about positioning flights. Would you rather never have to do a positioning flight again, or would you rather just have all of your household expenses suddenly be half as much?
Whoa, I would choose the latter. I would rather my expenses be cut in half because this might be an unpopular opinion. I don't mind a positioning flight. I usually they're a couple hours, the layovers 2 to 3 hours, and that's okay with me. If I'm really excited about whatever trip I'm about to take, that's a blip on the radar of the time that I'm investing in wherever I'm off to, and it feels much more exciting to me to think about, wow, if my expenses could be cut in half, what does that then free up in terms of the budget I'd have available to make the trips when I get to that destination even more spectacular? What would you do?
I would rather never have to do a positioning flight again. Um,
Really? Oh, wow.
I'm in a different weird financial place though, and I prefer to live in high cost of living areas. We live in Las Vegas right now, which is still much cheaper than Jersey City, which is where we lived before. But this question comes from because we have a lot of people from the Midwest where they're like, all the deals are from San Francisco or Los Angeles or JFK or Washington, D.C. And I live in Kansas City and I can't take advantage of any of those deals. To which I usually respond, there's always a trade off. If you're based in Kansas, you're going to have to do a positioning flight to pretty much anywhere. If you're based in Oklahoma, you have to do a positioning flight to cross over the ocean. I don't even know if you can take international flights from Oklahoma. But your cost of living is so much lower versus somebody who lives in Washington, D.C. or New York City. So there's always a trade off where I just ask people, like, do you want to move to live next to JFK, or do you want to live next to Reagan or LAX or San Francisco or something like that? Because the cost of living is twice what somebody's paying in Oklahoma or Kansas, but they're always going to have to do a positioning flight. So I think it's a little bit of a trade off. And obviously, lots of other things come into the decision of, do I want to live in a low cost of living area or a high cost of living area, just based off of lifestyle preferences and everything. But yeah, with the positioning flights and a lot of the deals always coming out of big cities, if you're in a lower cost of living area, it's not the end of the world. Like, with all of the savings that you have, especially if you're working a remote job where maybe you're working for a New York company, but you're living in rural Illinois or something, you can pocket a lot of those savings and just buy a positioning flight to go to New York and fly out from there.
Totally agree with you. And I love the way you frame this. I would love to make a plug for Chicago as an amazing home base if you're a big traveler, because compared to the New Yorks and LAs and Seattles, cost of living can be relatively affordable depending on what neighborhood you choose. And our airport, while lacking in lounge options, makes up for it in the number of flight options that are available to us, especially direct. I feel very, very fortunate with how few positioning flights I've had to take given where I'm based.
Yeah, I think that Illinois and Texas have a lot of flight options compared to the cost of living. I know that no one's probably done a study of, like, number of direct international flight options you have divided by average cost of living for your area, but if somebody did that study, I imagine Chicago would rank very, very well.
Completely agree, and someone should do that study. I would be very interested to read that list. So if somebody knows of something that exists, let us know.
Would you rather do a positioning flight to get a nicer business class product, or not have to do a positioning flight? So you get a direct flight from your home airport, but the business class product is not quite as nice. Like, if we're comparing Q suites versus, I don't know, American Airlines regular business class with the lay flat seat.
Now that I've experienced Q Suites a few times, I can speak to how wonderful it is, and it really is quite a step above most other options. I would probably do a positioning flight just for the purposes of being able to do it again, and the food is just that much better. I would do the positioning flight. I'm betting that your answer is you'd rather go direct, but what's your answer?
I think I'd rather go direct because we've flown to Frankfurt a couple times, most recently on Eurowings Discover Airlines, which no one's even heard of. It's like a subsidiary of Lufthansa. We booked it on Air Canada last minute because my KLM flight schedule got moved. So we flew this thing called Discover Airlines, which is like a 222 configuration. So it's fine if you're traveling with someone, super awkward if you're not. There's no space, there's no wall, there's no partition. You have a tiny TV. The planes are pretty old. It's just like old retired people from Germany who wanted to party in Las Vegas. It's very much for the German travelers and not for the US people going to Germany. My husband's chair had hair on it. I don't know whose hair that was. My chair had crumbs on it. I don't know whose crumbs those were. It was not luxurious, but it was lay flat and I slept fine. The food was fine. The amenity kit was pretty cute. And it was straight in, or it was straight out of Las Vegas, which was fantastic. The other time that we've flown to Frankfurt was Singapore Airlines from JFK, which was fantastic. I absolutely love that. And it was nice because we lived in JFK at the time. But if I had to go to Frankfurt again, I'm not going to position to JFK just to experience Singapore Airlines to Frankfurt again. I would much rather just drive over to the airport and be like, well, we got this Discover Airlines Eurowings thing for the next, I don't know what that flight was, 9 hours. And I'll just make do with that. I don't really want to do a positioning flight unless it's something like amazingly good. Like, if they brought Singapore Suites back to JFK, I do it for that. But Business class? I don't think I would.
I chose a very circuitous route home from Melbourne, Australia earlier this year just to experience Singapore Air business class. I probably spent an extra 8 hours traveling versus any other option. I think it was worth it. I really loved the experience. So maybe someday my answer to that will change. But for now, an amazing business class experience can be pretty special.
I've flown Singapore Airlines more than any other product, and I'm okay with positioning to Los Angeles because I've just accepted that needs to happen most of the time, and it's a 45-minute flight to get home from Los Angeles. JSX is great. I love them, and I love not having to deal with LAX airport if we fly JSX home. But yeah, I don't think I'd want to position all the way to New York unless we had to. At the top of my bucket list of flights I want to take is anything that's in and out direct of Las Vegas. There's a Korean Airlines flight direct from Vegas to Seoul. It is very, very hard to book. Alaska Airlines is the go to one, and they usually will only release one seat per flight, sometimes two, and I am eyeing that. But that's at the top of the list. Aer Lingus just launched a direct, or they are launching a direct from Vegas to Ireland in October. I hear that Aer Lingus is not that impressive. I'm still gonna do it because it's direct from Vegas and it's a lay flat seat and Ireland's cool. At the top of my list too. I think I've flown most of the other ones except for KLM because that one got moved, but direct Las Vegas to Amsterdam, even though I've been to Amsterdam already, I want to do that direct flight. I do positioning flights all the time just because we have to, but oh man, if there's a direct flight, I am taking that.
I love it. And I love how up on it you are of what's coming next to Las Vegas.
Oh yeah. And I guess okay, for the next would you rather spend the extra night at the positioning airport hotel like New York or Miami or Los Angeles or something like that cuz those are pretty nice tourist cities anyway, or just book your positioning flight same day as your international over the ocean flight and then just get through as fast as possible.
Usually when I'm coming back from a trip or on my way to I'm so focused on that. I don't wanna have an extra day in New York City, or I don't wanna be distracted with Miami. I wanna pack for the destination I'm heading to, and I'm excited on the way home to get home to my dog. So I'm all about more focused travel these days, I think. How about you?
On the outbound, I'm okay with spending an extra day in Los Angeles. We have our whole routine. We go to Hi Ho Burger. There's a lot of expensive hotels in Los Angeles or New York where I can use like a category 1 through 7 Hyatt certificate that I get for being globalist, or the 85K certificate that I get for having the MX Brilliant card. So we'll usually use those for those like one night stays at layover airports anyway. People are always like, okay, that's great that you have an 85K certificate, but where do you stay for just one night? Los Angeles, they've got some expensive hotels that are prime use case for that. But on the way home, I'm just ready to be home. So usually I will book a like category 1 through 4 certificate or something just on the way home. And I'll usually end up canceling it. And then I will move my American Airlines flight or whatever positioning flight I have to be the same day. Like if we've landed at LAX, I'm like, okay, cool. Our flight from over the ocean was not delayed. We are back. It is 9 a.m. I am going to try to move that American Airlines flight to as soon as I can get on the next flight home because I'm just ready to be home at that point.
I ask you a question I just got from a friend the other day. If you were coming from Asia, landing into SFO, and then had your positioning flight home, would you consider 2 hours enough? Would that be enough of a cushion in your mind, or would you choose a 4 hour layover instead to create more of a cushion for your positioning flight home?
I would create a cushion. I would do 4 hours because if you have a 2 hour layover and you're still in the air, you can't. I mean, I guess they have Wi Fi on planes, but like that's a struggle to try to get yourself rescheduled. Whereas if you are scheduling a later flight and then you land earlier than expected, or you gave yourself too much time, like it's a 7 hour layover, you can probably get that rescheduled to sooner. Like Southwest is great for this because with Southwest, they're so flexible. You can move your flights all over the place. it is always easier to move a flight up rather than be like, I'll just move that back a little bit. Because if you're stuck in the air and they're like, sorry, there's weird weather over Chicago this winter, we can't land yet. And you're like, I'm going to miss my other flight that may or may not take off. Yeah, it's a bit of a struggle to do it that way. So I'm a little bit more risk averse and I do leave myself like at least 4 hours, even if I'm like, well, we're going to move that flight up so I can get home same day.
Great tip. I love that perspective. Thank you.
Yeah. This has been so much fun. So, as we kind of wrap up, and you've given so many great tips here today, what would you say is your number one tip for people who are looking to level up in points and miles?
Number one piece of advice is don't let analysis paralysis be the thing that stands between you and taking the dream vacation. I think a lot of people are looking for the perfect redemption where they're sure that this is the best possible use of their points. And the reality is, the perfect redemption does not exist. You need to put good ahead of perfect in this scenario and take the trip because you can always earn more points. This isn't the only trip you can take with points, but if it allows you to use points instead of your hard earned money on a dream vacation, that is a win. Book the trip is my big piece of advice.
Great advice. And speaking of great advice, do you have anybody you'd like to give a shout out to for other people to follow for even more travel tips?
Love to follow Megan from Top Knots and Layovers. She's primarily on TikTok and gives fantastic advice, especially about the luxury travel space.
Perfect. And where can we find you on the internet?
I'm at Points by Jay on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all the platforms. So you can find me there or at pointsbyjay.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Jess, for joining us today. And this is the first time we played Would You Rather, but this has been a really fun episode. So thank you so much for doing this experiment with me. And I'm excited to see you at all the different points things in the future.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.